How many of you guys, I know none of us go to bars at all, but how many of you guys have played darts before?
Oh, that game.
Ooh. You guys have played darts? Or if you haven't played darts, do you at least understand the concept of darts?
It's like throwing eggs at zombies.
So you got two names. So you got much more symmetrical dartboards than this, but you get the idea. So you've got this one's way too big. So you got your dartboard, and then there's typically the and I'll do a lot less sections just to save time. So if what we want to talk about today, besides Post-its being everywhere and all of them on business, is consistent versus accurate. So if I'm throwing darts, what would be a consistent throw?
Anywhere. As long as they're all together.
Yeah. So just anywhere, right? So if you had one there, and one there. That's consistent, correct? So what would be accurate?
If that was where you were aiming?
So the answer is it depends, right? It depends on where you're aiming. So if you're trying to get in 320s, if you were accurate, that dart hitting in the 20s would be an accurate throw, right? So then now add that the normal words that are what? What do I always push you guys on?
Effective. The F words.
The F words. Effective and efficient, right? So the important piece here with consistency and accuracy is trying to bridge them together, right? Because if you're consistent but not accurate, then you're hitting the same place every time, but it's not where you want it to be. But if you're accurate but you're not consistent, so you hit one here, which is what you're aiming for, but then the other one might go here, the other one might go here, and you're accurate with one but not three. The other part, if you're consistent, is typically because there's some repeatable way of doing something. So if you've got, you're over at the bar, you got your dartboard here, and homeboy here is throwing your darts.
Yeah.
What? He's going to have a problem.
It's professional.
So typically, there's also a bar back here with beer in it, right? So if you're consistent and you can hit something without having to put a lot of mental energy into it, you can have fun. Because you don't have to be overly concentrating. You can just have beer and have fun and still just throw the darts at the board. On the other hand, if you're really inefficiently consistent or accurate, you have to totally concentrate. I mean, you've seen people at the bar that they're the assholes that are taking forever, and they're focused, and they're totally zoned in. They're not having beers with anybody, but then they're more accurate because they're so focused on it. But there's so much mental energy that's expended because they have to focus so hard to try to be accurate, and then they're assholes and they're not fun to play darts with. So the key is to try to combine both. The same thing is with being effective and efficient. Is it's not necessarily good enough to be just effective. Back because it's the same thing up here. Is if you're really effective but you're not efficient, you're using a lot of that energy to really focus on doing it right. Whereas if you're efficient, you're just kind of winging it at the board and having a good old time, but it might not be what you're after. So the key is to try to bridge the gap of effectiveness and efficiency. And so how can homeboy here make sure that he's effective and efficient?
Stop at 2 beers.
So stop at 2 beers. That's one thing. Okay, what's up? What else?
Practice.
Practice. Why stopping at 2 beers? Why does that matter beyond being wasted? And why does practice? Why does that matter?
Because you get better when you practice things.
But why?
Because your muscles remember it.
Muscle memory. which muscle memory comes in from routine. And routines are synonymous to what?
Efficiency.
Systems, right?
Yes.
So, you know, when you're kind of in the zone throwing darts, you know there's certain things that you have to do to be effective and efficient. You need to have just enough beer in you that you can concentrate, but not too much that you kind of go over the top. You know that at the certain point, if you're trying to hit something in the middle, you line up in the middle, and you have the consistent throw that you're going every time. If you need to hit the 16, you know you've got to move over a little bit. So those are the systems that you are developing over time in order to build up that efficiency and effectiveness. And it's the same thing when it comes to work, to business. So one of the discussions we had last week was how can you systemize creativity? And at the end of it, you can't. But you can systemize the things that get you in a mindset to be creative. So there's certain things that you can do to help generate ideas and create those frameworks that help get you know where you got to stand on the board. So it's kind of the equivalent of the 2 beers get you in a mode of inspiration to be able to hit your darts or to be able to come up with those ideas. But 6 beers and you're sloppy and you're all over the place. No beers, you're not quite loose enough. So it's the same thing with creativity, is you got to know what are your triggers and how do you build your frameworks around how to generate good ideas. Because there's certain things that you can do to get you into the mindset to be creative. There's certain things, there's certain information that you need to have in order to be able to then turn that into results. So, you know, if we're playing darts and it's just throw it at the board, there's no real rules to the game, how are you going to know if you're winning or losing? As opposed to, you know, when you're working on a project, if you don't know what it's supposed to be, if you don't know what the goals are, then you don't know how to work backwards and try to build up those efficiencies and effectiveness. So, you know, and creativity is not just the designers and not just the programmers and not just the writers. Creativity also comes from how do we make the business better? How do we be creatively communicating to our clients? How do we make sure that relationships are kept at a high level? And that comes from really focusing in on those things that can put you in the position to execute at an effective level and an efficient level. So what are some other ways that you guys have seen that kind of the framing of something that doesn't seem to be systematic, but you know that you have to have certain things lined up or you have to be in a certain framework in order to be more effective? What's something else?
Computers.
What about them?
The fact that they make it more efficient and effective to design things.
Mm-hmm.
When we're designing things, we've got rulers and guides, and that way everything is accurate because we're measuring, doing all that stuff, setting things up for print. And also, when you're sitting at a computer, you are in the mindset to be working.
Yeah. So it's a lot of that's learning, systematically learning when to use what tools.
Kind of piggyback on that is like templates and like building things and saving them and kind of saving them in a way that you can reuse them for other things.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Awesome.
Core messaging. We have a system like that gets us in a place to start thinking about that client in particular, and then we go into the creative process.
Right.
Coming and developing those messages.
Yeah. So have you guys noticed when trying to create something in messaging is a perfect example, is if you just step in and start something, it's hard to kind of get the engines warmed up and get going. But if there's certain kind of, there's a reason why athletes warm up before going out on the court. It's the same thing. You've got to get your mind in the right place. You got to get warmed up from a mental perspective and focused in on the task at hand. So even if you start your, and that's really important from when you're starting on a meeting, on working on messaging or something creative, is to really focus in on how can we make sure that we get everyone in the right place mentally before we try to do it. Because what that's going to build is more efficiency, because it's going to take not nearly as long to get going on something. And it's also going to be more effective because everyone's going to be kind of more in sync and going. So when you start meetings that you're having to come up with messaging or concepting or sketching, start with, we're going to have the client brief soon. Start with those. Start with the Prezi. Start with just doing a recap of what the client is, who they are, what they're about, and what they do. And that's going to create that framework that gets you warmed up to do what you got to do. So, anything else?
Wouldn't technically these Monday morning meetings be like systematic? It gets you in the right mindset for the week on what you need to focus on with the numbers, and whiteboard wisdom makes you focus on some kind of new goal that we're implementing or something like that.
Absolutely. And that was one of the big things they talked about Rockefeller habits, because they talked about annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily huddles, and that's a perfect example of just getting everybody on the same page and pointing in the right direction and creating that framework. So that's kind of the method to the madness of why we have those things, is just to, because it's so easy, especially the bigger we get, to start kind of fading focus and direction. So all these huddles are meant to continually refine and keep focused. And the more people we add, the stronger our laser becomes. And if it gets deferred, it gets weakened. But if we concentrate it, then we've got Ben, Sam, Dark Cloud, Malibu, Tropic Thunder, Deep Dust, Turbo,
Sheep.
and then that happens. so it's really important to make sure that we stay focused, and that's what the huddles are about.
Like right amount of workload, like knowing your limit.
Yeah.
Like last week, I was trying to be creative, and I just had my plate full, and I had to take a few things off thanks to Brian, and I was able to breathe and take a step back and really just hammer some stuff out. So
Yeah, and so that's kind of knowing your top end boundary. There's also an element of having that bottom boundary. We talk about the green, yellow, red. Most of us operate most efficiently and effectively in kind of very upper green, lower yellow, because there's a sense of urgency, and naturally we're all a little bit of procrastinators. So if there's just a little bit of pressure, it makes us execute it at a higher level. But if you get too high into the yellow, into the red, then you become flustered and clustered, and you can't really think straight, and then your efficiency and your effectiveness go down because you can't focus. So it's really, and once again, it's a good example of bounding what's going to let you be creative in whatever it is that you're doing. So.